Silver just touched $109 this morning. That's not a typo. $109 per ounce. And while everyone's celebrating the parabolic move, there's something happening behind the scenes that should terrify every American who owns silver in an IRA or 401 kilobits. I'm about to show you why the biggest threat to your retirement metals isn't market volatility. It's your own government. And if you don't act in the next 7 days, you could wake up owning nothing but a paper statement where your physical silver used to be. This isn't fear-mongering. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is regulatory reality that's been quietly put in place while silver was making headlines for breaking through $100. The legal framework for seizing precious metals from retirement accounts already exists. The historical precedent has been set twice in American history, and the excuse they'll use is sitting right in front of us. They're going to call it national welfare. They're going to say it's for the greater good. And millions of Americans are going to lose their silver without ever seeing it coming. Let me show you exactly what's happening and why next week might be your last chance to protect what you think you own. Because right now, if your silver is sitting in a custodial IRA somewhere, you don't actually own it. You own a claim on it. And that distinction is about to become the most expensive lesson in modern financial history. Here's what triggered this. Silver didn't just cross $109 by accident. This move has been building for months, through a perfect storm of supply crises, China weaponizing exports, and COMEX vaults draining faster than anyone predicted. But here's what changed everything. On January 1st, a series of regulatory shifts went into effect that fundamentally altered how the government views precious metals in retirement accounts. The IRS didn't send out press releases. Congress didn't hold hearings. They just quietly changed the rules on custodial authority, and suddenly, the pathway to confiscation got a whole lot shorter. Now, before you think this can't happen in America, let me take you back to April 5th, 1933. That's when President Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, forbidding the hoarding of gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates. Americans were given until May 1st to turn in their gold to the Federal Reserve in exchange for $20.67 per ounce. If you refused, you faced a $10,000 fine or 10 years in federal prison. Most people complied because the government made the consequences crystal clear. But here's what most people don't know. 16 months later, on August 9, 1934, Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6814, and this time it was silver. The government demanded Americans surrender their silver bullion to the United States Mint within 90 days. Same penalties, same coercion, same outcome. The only difference was timing. They took the gold first to stabilize the dollar. Then they came back for the silver to control the monetary system completely. The legal justification, the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. That law was designed to give the president emergency economic powers during wartime. But Roosevelt used it during peacetime to confiscate private property from American citizens. The courts upheld it. Congress didn't stop it. And it set a precedent that's still on the books today. That law was later updated and strengthened through the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, which gives the president even broader authority to seize assets during declared national emergencies. Now think about what we're living through right now. In January 2026, we've got energy crisis building with Iran protests and Strait of Hormuz risks. We've got China designating silver as a strategic material and restricting exports through only 44 approved companies. We've got industrial demand skyrocketing because solar panels and electric vehicles can't function without silver. We've got COMEX registered inventory down 70% from 2020 levels, sitting at just 124 million ounces with only 28% of total vault holdings actually available for delivery. This isn't a normal commodity shortage. This is a strategic crisis. And when governments face strategic crises involving materials critical to national security and industrial production, they don't ask nicely. They take what they need and justify it later. Here's where it gets personal. For anyone holding silver in an IRA, the structure of precious metals, IRAs creates a vulnerability that physical holders don't have. When you buy silver for your IRA, you can't take delivery yourself. IRS regulations require the metal to be held by an approved custodian in an approved depository. You get a statement showing you own X number of ounces, but that metal is sitting in a vault that beast is controlled by a third party, regulated by the federal government, and subject to whatever emergency powers get invoked. Think about what that means. If the government decides silver is a strategic material that needs to be controlled for national welfare, they don't need to show up at your house. They don't need to search safety deposit boxes. They just need to send a notice to the custodians and depositories that hold IRA metals. One executive order, one emergency declaration, and suddenly your IRA custodian is legally required to convert your physical silver into a cash equivalent based on whatever price the government sets. And here's the kicker. You won't have any say in it. Your custodian's legal obligation is to comply with federal regulations. If those regulations change and require them to surrender precious metals held in retirement accounts, they'll do it. They'll send you a letter explaining that due to emergency powers invoked under the National Welfare Clause, your silver has been monetized at the official rate. And here's your new account balance. You won't get your metal, you'll get a number on a statement. This isn't theoretical. In early January 2026, there were regulatory updates to custodial responsibilities that give financial regulators increased oversight of how precious metals are held in retirement structures. The language is bureaucratic and boring, which is exactly how they sneak this stuff through. But what it does is create a clear legal pathway for government access to IRA-held metals during declared emergencies. Now let's connect this to what China just did, because this is where you see the global chess game playing out. On January 1st, China implemented their new export licensing system for silver. They reclassified it as a strategic material, alongside rare earth elements and critical minerals. They limited exports to 44 approved companies who need government permission for every shipment. Why would they do this? Because they understand that silver isn't just money anymore. It's industrial power, it's energy infrastructure, it's technological dominance. China produces a significant portion of global silver supply. By controlling exports, they're essentially weaponizing the metal. They can restrict supply to enemies, favor allies, and use it as leverage in trade negotiations. It's the rare earth playbook applied to silver. And if China is treating silver as a strategic weapon, how long do you think it'll be before the United States government decides they need strategic control over domestic silver supplies? That's where the national welfare excuse comes in. They won't call it confiscation. They'll call it strategic resource allocation. They'll say that industrial users need guaranteed access to silver for defense production, for renewable energy build-out, for technological manufacturing. They'll say that allowing private hoarding of a strategic material during a national crisis is unpatriotic and economically destructive. They'll frame it as your patriotic duty to contribute your silver to the national welfare, and if you're holding physical silver at home, you can choose to ignore that call. You can hide it. You can refuse, but if your silver is in an IRA, you don't get a choice. Your custodian makes that choice for you based on whatever regulations they're required to follow. This is why the distinction between IRA silver and physical silver in your possession is so critical right now. Let me show you what's happening in the physical market that makes this scenario more likely, not less. Between January 12th and January 19th, 33.45 million ounces of silver were physically withdrawn from COMEX registered inventory. That's roughly 26% of total registered inventory gone in 1 week, not rolled to the next contract, not settled in cash, physically removed from the vaults. This is what delivery stress looks like. Industrial users, institutional buyers, and sovereign entities are taking physical possession because they don't trust the paper market anymore. They're standing for delivery in record numbers. And COMEX is scrambling to source metal because registered inventory that's actually available for delivery keeps shrinking. Now put yourself in the government's position. You've got critical industries demanding silver for manufacturing. You've got COMEX vaults draining. You've got China restricting exports. You've got prices going parabolic, which makes everything more expensive. And you've got hundreds of millions of ounces sitting in IRA custodial accounts owned by private citizens who can't even access it themselves. What do you think happens when the government decides they need that metal more than you do? They're going to say that individual investors holding silver in retirement accounts during a strategic shortage is unacceptable. They're going to point to the 1,933 and 1934 precedents. They're going to invoke emergency powers, and they're going to force custodians to surrender that metal to the Treasury or to approved industrial users at a government-set price. You'll get compensated, sure, but not at $109 per ounce, or whatever the free market price is at that moment. You'll get the official rate, probably based on some average historical price that's conveniently much lower. This is exactly what happened in 1933 with gold. Roosevelt forced Americans to turn in gold at $20.67 per ounce. Then, immediately after collecting all that gold, the government revalued it to $35 per ounce. Through the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, the government made a 70% profit on metal they confiscated from their own citizens. You think they won't do that again if given the opportunity? Here's what makes 2026 different from 1933, and honestly worse. Back then, physical gold was the only form of wealth confiscation they could execute. Today, with digital accounts and custodial structures, they don't even need physical enforcement. It's all electronic. Your custodian gets a regulatory directive. They convert your metal to cash at the official rate. Your account balance changes overnight, and there's nothing you can do about it because the metal was never in your physical possession to begin with. This is why I keep saying the difference between owning physical silver versus owning IRA silver is everything. Physical silver that you control, that's in your safe or in a private vault under your name with no custodial intermediary. That requires actual confiscation. They need to find it, seize it, and deal with the political fallout of armed agents showing up at citizens' homes. That's messy, that's visible, that creates resistance. But IRA silver, that's clean, that's bureaucratic, that's just regulatory compliance. Your custodian sends you a letter, your account balance adjusts, and the government gets the metal they want without any dramatic confrontation. Most Americans won't even understand what happened until it's over. Now I'm going to tell you what you need to do about this. But first, I want you to understand the timeline we're working with. Silver at $109 changes everything. This isn't a gradual climb anymore. This is a parabolic move that's going to force government response. When strategic materials go parabolic, governments don't sit back and watch. They intervene. And based on the regulatory groundwork that's already been laid, that intervention is going to target the easiest source of supply, which is custodial IRA holdings. I'm not saying this happens tomorrow. I'm not saying there's a specific bill with a number that's been publicly introduced. What I'm saying is the legal framework exists. The historical precedent has been set. The strategic justification is building, and the regulatory updates from early January created the mechanism. All that's missing is the political decision to pull the trigger. And when silver hit $109, that decision got a lot closer. So here's what you do. If you're holding silver in a traditional custodial IRA, you need to understand your options right now. The safest move is converting that IRA silver into physical silver that you control directly. Now, there are IRS rules around this. You can't just withdraw metal from an IRA without tax consequences, but there are legal structures that allow you to maintain the tax advantage status while taking physical possession. One option is a self-directed IRA with a checkbook control LLC structure. This allows you to be the manager of an LLC that's owned by your IRA, and that LLC can purchase and store physical metals in a location you control. It's more complex than a standard custodial IRA, but it puts the metal under your direct management instead of a third-party custodian. That makes government seizure significantly harder, because they'd need to target individual LLCs instead of just sending a directive to major custodians. Another option, if you're willing to take the tax hit, is to distribute the IRA entirely and take physical possession outside of any retirement structure. Yes, you'll pay income tax on the distribution. Yes, if you're under 59.5, you'll pay the early withdrawal penalty. But you'll have physical metal in your hands that can't be confiscated through regulatory directive. You need to run the numbers with a tax professional to see if that makes sense for your situation. But for some people, paying the taxes now and securing the metal is better than losing everything to government seizure later. The third option, and this is the minimum you should do if you're not ready for the other two, is to verify exactly where your IRA metals are stored, who the custodian is, and what their policy would be in the event of government emergency orders. Call them directly. Ask them what happens if the government invokes strategic material controls. Ask them if they would comply with the directive to surrender IRA-held metals. Most won't give you a straight answer, but their evasiveness will tell you everything you need to know. What you cannot do is nothing. What you cannot do is assume this will never happen, because it's America and we have property rights. We had property rights in 1933 too, and the government took gold anyway. We had property rights in 1934, and they took silver anyway. The idea that it can't happen again is naive. The idea that your IRA structure protects you is dangerously wrong. Now let's talk about what happens if you're not in an IRA. If you're holding physical silver directly, if you've already taken possession, if it's in your safe or in a private vault with allocated storage in your name, you're in a much stronger position. The government would have to execute actual physical confiscation, which is legally and politically much harder than regulatory conversion of custodial accounts. But even physical holders need to think about what comes next. If the government does move on IRA metals, that removes a massive amount of supply from the market overnight. Prices will spike even higher. Industrial demand won't decrease. Physical availability for private purchase will essentially disappear. Anyone who waited to act will be competing for whatever scraps remain at prices that make $109 look cheap. This is the window. This is the moment where you can still act before the system breaks and before the government steps in. Silver at $109 isn't the end of the move, it's the beginning of the endgame. And in that endgame, the only silver that matters is physical silver in your possession. Not in a custodial structure, not in an IRA account, not in an ETF where you own shares instead of metal. Look, I understand this sounds extreme. I understand some of you are thinking this guy's crazy. The government's not going to seize retirement accounts. But I need you to ask yourself one question. If silver is now a strategic material critical to national defense, renewable energy infrastructure, and technological manufacturing, and if supply is so tight that COMEX vaults are draining 26% of inventory in a single week, and if China has already weaponized it through export controls, what makes you think the United States government won't do exactly what China's doing? They're not going to call it confiscation. They're going to call it emergency allocation. They're going to say it's temporary. They're going to promise fair compensation. And then they're going to take your silver, the same way they took gold in 1933 and silver in 1934. The only question is whether you're holding it in a structure where they can take it with a regulatory directive, or whether you've moved it to physical possession where they'd actually have to come find it. This is why the next 7 days matter. Not because there's a specific deadline I know about, but because silver crossing $109 accelerates the timeline for government response. It validates the strategic crisis narrative. It gives them the political cover they need to invoke emergency powers for national welfare. Once that happens, once the directive goes out to custodians, it's too late. You can't convert your IRA metals to physical after the government's already seized them. I'm going to give you the steps one more time because this is that important. Step 1. If you have silver in a custodial IRA, contact a qualified self-directed IRA administrator this week and ask about checkbook control LLC structures that allow direct possession. Step 2. Consult with a tax professional about the cost and consequences of full IRA distribution if direct control isn't available. Step 3. Verify your custodian's policies and understand their legal obligations in emergency scenarios. Step 4. If you're holding physical silver outside retirement accounts, make sure it's in allocated storage or direct possession, not pooled storage where you're just one of many claimants. And Step 5. Understand that this isn't about market timing. This isn't about trying to sell at the top and buy back lower. This is about ownership structure. This is about control. This is about making sure that when the government decides they need strategic materials for national welfare, your silver isn't sitting in an account structure where they can just take it with paperwork. The people who lose in this scenario are the people who thought their IRA was safe because it's a retirement account. The people who thought the government would never touch retirement savings because that's politically toxic. But when they frame it as national security, when they say it's for defense production and energy independence, when they invoke the Trading with the Enemy Act or the International Emergency Economic Powers Act and declare a strategic materials emergency, political concerns go out the window. History shows us this clearly. Roosevelt's gold confiscation order wasn't popular. People were furious. But they complied because the penalties were severe and because the government controlled the narrative. They said it was necessary to end the depression. They said private hoarding was making the crisis worse. They said it was everyone's patriotic duty, and 70% of Americans turned in their gold rather than risk prison. The same thing will happen with silver if they go down this path. Most people will comply. Most custodians will follow orders, and most IRA holders will wake up one day to discover they no longer own physical silver. They own a cash balance based on whatever price the government decided was fair. By the time you realize what happened, the metal's already gone. This is not the future I want. This is not the America I want to live in, but it's the trajectory we're on. And silver hitting $109 just accelerated the timeline. The legal framework exists. The precedent has been set. The strategic justification is building. All that's missing is the political will to execute. And with China restricting exports, COMEX vaults draining, and prices going parabolic, that political will is growing stronger every single day. So you have a choice to make. You can hope I'm wrong. You can assume this won't happen. You can leave your silver in a custodial IRA and trust that property rights will protect you. Or you can look at the history, look at the current crisis, look at the regulatory changes from January, and decide that physical possession is the only real ownership. I know which choice I've made. I know which choice protects my family. And I'm telling you what I'd do if I were in your situation because I believe this threat is real and the window to act is closing fast. Before we wrap up, I need you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already because we're tracking this situation daily. Every move in the regulatory environment, every change in COMEX inventory, every signal that government intervention is coming, we're going to cover it. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss these critical updates. And leave me a comment below. Tell me if you're holding silver in an IRA. Tell me if you're planning to convert to physical possession. Tell me if you think this risk is real or if you think I'm overreacting. I want to hear from you because this community is how we stay informed and how we protect each other when the mainstream media won't tell you what's really happening. The information I'm giving you isn't speculation. The Trading with the Enemy Act is real. Executive Orders 6102 and 6814 are historical fact. The January regulatory updates to custodial authority are documented. China's export control started January 1st. COMEX vaults lost 26% of registered inventory in 1 week. Silver hit $109 this morning. These aren't predictions, they're facts. What I'm predicting is how the government responds to these facts, and based on history, the response involves taking control of strategic materials they decide are too important to leave in private hands. Your IRA silver is the lowest hanging fruit. It's already in custodial structures, it's already regulated, it's already tracked. Taking it doesn't require armed agents or house searches. It just requires regulatory directive and custodial compliance. This is why you need to act now while you still can. This is your warning. This is your chance. Don't say nobody told you. Don't say you didn't see it coming. The signs are everywhere if you know where to look. Silver at $109 isn't a celebration. It's a threat. And the biggest threat isn't the price going down. It's the government stepping in to control the price by controlling the supply. When they do that, they're coming for the easiest supply first, and that's custodial IRA accounts. Protect yourself. Take physical possession. Get your silver out of structures where the government can seize it with paperwork. Do it this week. Do it now before the directive comes down and before it's too late. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, comment, and I'll see you in the next one, where we'll keep tracking this developing crisis. Stay safe, stay informed, and whatever you do, don't let them take your silver without a fight.